And now I'm excited to introduce Mr. Bryan Sarpad, Senior or Sales Engineer Manager at phoenixNAP, and Mr. Anthony Spiteri, Senior Technologist of Product Strategy at Veeam. Bryan and Anthony, are you there?
Yep, sure am. Hi, guys.
Hello, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for being on the EcoCast today. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. I'm Bryan Sarpad, and today we're going to discuss disaster recovery, some of the main causes of disasters, and some of the best practices that you can employ to be prepared for when a disaster actually hits. So this first slide is based on a recent Spiceworks survey of over 700 respondents from North America and Europe. As you can see, the vast majority have suffered an outage in the past year, with most people suffering more than one. This next slide shows a wide variety of the culprits. A very common culprit is ransomware. That's usually the result of human error. Typically, some employee doesn't realize that they're visiting a malicious website or installing some software that they shouldn't be, and suddenly their network's infected and a disaster is looming. This is why modern businesses need to have a robust disaster recovery plan in place. And let's see. All right. So outages are never cheap. They often have many hidden costs beyond just the immediate damage. When preparing a DR plan, it's really important to identify all the potential areas of your business that might be impacted. Sometimes it can be as simple as a business application going down and a couple people in a branch office are impacted. Sometimes it's far more critical if you're a healthcare organization or a government entity. Lives might be at stake, so it's really important to have a very strong plan in place. So why disaster recovery is key to ransomware protection? Having a tested plan is part of a larger comprehensive business continuity solution that most companies should have in place to survive a large outage. And what do you need to do to be prepared for that? Well, you need to really think about all your business needs, and we're going to go over some of those fundamentals right now. So, step one, assessing your business needs. This is usually one of the most complex parts of disaster recovery planning. We've worked with a wide variety of organizations. Some are centrally located in a single location. Some are spread out across the world. Typically, with larger organizations, one of the more complex pieces is in the network design. If you have a very robust MPLS network or lots of private circuits, VPNs, how do those connect back to your failover site in the actual event of a disaster? What kind of infrastructure is required? Do you have any physical servers that need to be replicated? Do you have any actual physical network appliances that need to be accounted for? Often, hardware appliances aren't compatible with some of the virtualized network appliances out there. I've run into this myself with certain Cisco firewall appliances. And so typically you have to start augmenting and adding physical appliances to meet all the actual disaster recovery needs. Let's see. Step two, what is your actual recovery time objective? How quick you need to restore, and what are your actual recovery point objectives? How recent the copy of the data is that you need to restore. Often these aren't the same for all your applications, so it's important to profile different applications, classify them into different tiers, and plan appropriately. All right. This next slide, we actually have a vendor checklist that helps you go through all the major steps required. And you can get it at that URL mentioned in the slide, phoenixnap.com/vendor-checklist. Typically, vendors, they come in different shapes and sizes. Some have very strong SLAs. Some will work with you to create custom SLAs. Some don't provide actual failover testing. One of the things we do at phoenixNAP is provide 2 free failover tests a year in all our DR as a service solutions. Let's see here. And what kind of onboarding? What's that experience like when you're actually getting everything set up? Do you have people available, a team of resources that know your actual needs and are helping you plan accordingly, or is it more of a do-it-yourself solution? It really depends on what your business needs are. Traditionally, most companies have looked at implementing DR themselves, and that model can be a little cumbersome. You're usually looking at securing your own colocation, purchasing a bunch of additional equipment. Potentially, you might be in the middle of a hardware refresh, and you might want to repurpose your older hardware at a DR site. All this gets really complex, and it's tough to scale, especially when you're constrained on budgets. Most people we've talked to seem to really like the benefits of DR as a service, where they don't have to make a large capital outlay and purchase a bunch of equipment themselves. Maybe they only need to get a critical firewall or something that can't be virtualized easy. So here are a couple of the reasons why people are looking at DR as a service or cloud DR. And here's just another comparison. I hit on this earlier. Traditionally, you might even need to build a second data center if you're large enough to justify that. Again, we're offering DR as a service, so everything would reside in our infrastructure, scalable very, very quickly. You don't have to worry about maintaining any hardware or anything other than just your core DR plan. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anthony to discuss some of the best practices on how to prepare for ransomware attacks.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Let's just go through and have a bit of a chat firstly about the basics, right? And then we'll look into, what Veeam's doing specifically to enable great partners like phoenixNAP to be able to offer their customers the best protection for ransomware that's possible. So let's go through and have a bit of a start and look at the first thing which everyone thinks about, which is antivirus. And the problem with antivirus is that, a lot of these guys have got really smart about how to actually prepare for the ransomware attacks. Let's go back a slide. There we go. So basically, when you think about the smartness of the ransomware that's out today, the sophistication, a lot of these guys are basically working around antivirus products. So while you do have antivirus, the reality is that even though you do have this, it does create a false sense of security. And definitely ransomware has shown that it can adapt and overcome most traditional virus scanners that are out there. Okay, so it's really important to understand that while you do have AV, it's only one part of the puzzle. When we look at other ways of how to prepare for ransomware attack, obviously it's all about, maintenance in terms of keeping your software up to date. If you guys, depending, again, we saw the sizes of the different companies that we had there. If you're a smaller company, you might not have a security team, but if you're a larger company, you are going to have a security team, right? So those larger companies with security teams, those guys would be doing all the penetration testing and searching for vulnerabilities. If you're a smaller company, you can get actual external consultants to come in and do that. But the best way to really test for threats is to keep software up to date. Training staff is important as well. Obviously the key to phishing attacks that try and go through email, they might look like a legitimate email, stuff that everyone should know, but you'd be surprised, especially when we're talking outside of the tech industry, how many people actually get stung. My mother, as an example, gets stung all the time with those emails, and it's a certain demographic, but they're the people that are working for you. So you do have to be aware of that and inform your employees. Obviously, backup plays a really important role in that. Not only backing up, but the frequency of backup, where you put it, and that sort of thing. So, those sorts of situations are exactly what you need to think about initially. And then when we start to roll in backup software, specifically with Veeam, we talk about the 3-2-1 rule. And the 3-2-1 rule of backup is basically about 3 different copies of your data on 2 different media, one of which is off-site, okay? And we actually extend this rule as well to 0, which is basically 0 is talking about verification as well. So how do you validate your backup once it's been backed up and put to these different locations? Obviously with Veeam, working together with phoenixNAP and even local, before you would send it out to phoenixNAP, we can validate that data, okay? We've got the technology built into the software, which means that not only does a job say that you would back up successfully, you have the opportunity to ensure that the data that you've backed up is actually valid. The 3-2-1 rule of backup, though, just to reiterate, the 3 different copies of the data. So 2 different media effectively can mean disk, can mean tape. That can mean cloud today as well, if you want to put it there. But obviously, we're talking about 1 copy off-site, which typically, when we talk about the 1 copy off-site these days, we're talking about cloud providers. At Veeam, we run a cloud provider program, of which phoenixNAP is one of our most trusted and most successful providers out there, and they offer a bunch of these services. So what we're going to do very quickly now is just go over a few different strategies that you might actually use, and a few of them will lead into phoenixNAP as well, and some of the offerings that they would actually have available to you guys today. So first, we're talking about the 3-2-1 with storage integration. So this is really talking about the fact that, we have integrations in a wide ecosystem with a lot of storage vendors. You see a list down there. We're actually adding them almost on a bi-monthly basis in terms of, storage hardware that we are compatible with. And effectively what that means when we've got storage integration is that we can see into the storage directory, and we actually are looking at offloading a lot of the tasks that would be in software on the hypervisor directly into the storage. What this means is that you can basically build out a more secure way and a quicker way to get your data back, but also a way to actually stream that data as well. So when you look here, you can see that in terms of ransomware, we've got a number of different restore points through the storage integration. So a backup job going to a repository, it's on a storage integrated partner. And then from there, we can basically talk about modern snapshots on the storage array as well, and actually dig into those storage snapshots and leverage them, okay? And the great thing about leveraging storage snapshots on an array is that they typically have a lower restore point objective, okay? A restore point means that, you can basically get as granular as you like, depending on, obviously, the amount of data that you want to store. And obviously, with the storage integration, what that means is that we can dig into those lower RPOs and also increase the RTOs, which is the restore time at the same point. So that's really important there when we look at storage integrations. Going into tape. Tape is an interesting one, right? Because tape, to a certain extent, is looked upon these days with less favour than what, say, cloud-based backup is. But make no mistake, tape is still very popular in the industry, and we still focus at Veeam on releasing features to enhance our tape support. So for those guys, typically, again, bigger companies are going to have tape units. But what we can also do is we can leverage the tape units of service providers. So in our previous version, we actually had a feature called Tape as a Service for our service providers, which allowed customers to back up using Cloud Connect technology, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides. And then from there, the ability for the provider to actually offload those backups or a copy of those backups to tape or to a virtual tape library, okay? So tape can be traditional tape where you actually have the physical tape, or it can be a virtual tape library which can be backed by something like an Amazon virtual tape library or storage gateway, okay? The biggest thing about tape is that they are truly air-gapped. So really, they are it's the only solution at the moment that offers a true air-gapped solution. When I talk about air-gapping when it comes to ransomware, it's very important. Obviously, ransomware works by getting into your network, by spreading in your network, getting into computers that are vulnerable. If you have your backups, and obviously what it does then when it infects, it goes to encrypt the data, it goes to make that data hard to access, that's where all the compensation comes and the ransoms come into play. If you export to tape, either yourself or through a provider, you're guaranteeing that that copy of the data is separate from any attack, okay? So suffice to say that tapes are still very important from that perspective. So when we move through to backup copy jobs, again, is something, when you think about the 3-2-1 rule, this is a way to create that secondary or third copy of your data. So effectively, with a backup copy job, you would pick a initial repository with your Veeam server. That could be local. And then you select a secondary location. And the secondary location, again, could be a cloud provider like phoenixNAP through their Veeam Cloud Connect services, or it could be a secondary data center or something like that. Obviously here, what we want to do is we want to encourage you guys to go to a great company like phoenixNAP. So you've got if you're a Veeam customer today, you've actually got this software built in, the ability to basically do a backup copy job straight away. And what it literally does is it takes that copy and sends it off-site. And then you've got, again, a holistic copy of the data, one whole copy that is completely off-site, again, satisfying that 3-2-1 rule. With regards to ransomware, this is safe enough. However, there's still the risk that a malicious user could get in and access a console and basically do a deletion job. So you want to ensure that your cloud providers like phoenixNAP are doing the right thing on their end to basically ensure that the data is secure just in case. And we've got mechanisms and features that we've added to our platform which they can take advantage of, like insider protection, which is basically a mechanism for the provider to add some additional protection on the backup data if it's been deleted. So again, very important there. The last thing is actually looking at Cloud Connect and Cloud Connect for backing up files. So Cloud Connect basically directly to a cloud provider. So phoenixNAP, you'd buy some storage, you'd buy their Cloud Connect backup service, you'd buy a chunk of storage, you'd get a username and password, that goes directly into the Veeam software, you then connect up to them and that becomes a cloud repository, okay? So in the same way that you got a backup copy job, now you're basically taking that data, sending it directly to the cloud provider, and then they store it locally for you, okay? Now, additionally to that, in terms of Cloud Connect backup, we also offer Cloud Connect replication. So Cloud Connect replication is more about the replica of a VM. So taking your workloads, having them in a standby situation on a cloud in case of a disaster. Okay, a little bit different use case, can still be used for ransomware purposes. But effectively, when we're talking about ransomware, the ability to have multiple copies of your data, some of which are air-gapped or separate to your system, is actually pretty critical, okay? So that's really just a very quick lightning overview of some of the features that we have, which phoenixNAP can leverage. And then from there, we'll talk a little bit about modern disaster recovery or data protection tips. Again, pretty standard sort of things, talking about strong user passwords, everything that you use. Nothing rocket sciencey there. The next one's really talking about VLAN segmentation. Again, that concept of airlocking to make sure that your network is segmented just in case of disaster. So if a disaster does happen, it can't actually come through. But that's pretty much a quick overview. I'm going to hand back to Brian to finish off. And if we've got any questions from there, we can go ahead. Back to you, Brian.
It looks like we did get a question in a minute ago from Angela Montgomery. Are we using our own hardware that we own and manage, or are we hosting with a cloud provider like AWS or Azure? We are actually hosting everything on hardware we own and operate. We actually own and operate our data center in Phoenix, Arizona, and we lease space at about a dozen other locations across the world. We own all our own hardware, and we're largely a VMware-based shop. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide now. So here are the primary solutions we offer. Veeam Cloud Connect Backup and Replication, as Anthony mentioned. Cloud Connect Backup is probably the most common thing we sell to Veeam customers. Like Anthony mentioned, it's just another way of getting an extra copy of your data off-site and at rest with a secure service provider like us. And the disaster recovery as a service, that is largely based around the Veeam Cloud Connect replication, meaning we're not just getting a backup of your data, or you're actually sending a replica that's associated with a hardware plan and virtual resources on our side. You can map your network ahead of time, create a runbook through the Veeam console, and actually perform failovers and test everything, fail back if need be. Let's see, we did roll out a managed backup for Office 365. Microsoft does include some basic backups, but if a employee leaves and you delete their mailbox, that kind of stuff doesn't get retained long-term with Microsoft's backup service. So Veeam went ahead and filled some of those gaps, and we're able to offer very long-term retention for Office 365. We have a cloud-based offering, Data Security Cloud, where all the virtual machines have Veeam backups built in. So you can just deploy your infrastructure, and we'll work with you to set up a retention schedule based on your needs, but all the virtual machines themselves have automated backups, so you don't have to worry about that. And let's see, this slide is just giving you a visual example of what it looks like with Cloud Connect. You're typically connecting from your on-prem environment or another cloud provider, and over SSL tunnels sending your backup or replica data. We do support WAN acceleration and all the higher-end features that Veeam offers. We got another question. Backup for Office 365, is that backing up SharePoint and OneDrive? Right now, our offering is it's just the mailboxes, the Exchange data. We are working to implement SharePoint and OneDrive. I don't have a concrete time frame for that, but it's definitely on our roadmap. Let's see here. So let's see the next slide here. Why phoenixNAP? Oh, actually, this slide's talking about our portal. So you can actually manage your Veeam backup repositories through our in-house client portal. You can set quotas, increase your storage space, get visibility into the an overview of all the statistics of your usage. It's pretty robust. And everything in our client portal is backed by two-factor authentication, because we do take security very seriously. And if anybody would like a demo of that at a future point, please reach out, and I'd be happy to get that scheduled for you. All right. The last, why phoenixNAP? We are a global service provider. We've been around since 2009. We have 6 different locations where we're supporting Veeam DR. I'll show you a map of those locations in a second. But we've worked with a wide variety of organizations, from government to healthcare to the financial sector, and help them implement very robust DR solutions using our infrastructure and the expertise that we have in-house. We have over 500 employees globally. Many of them are accredited engineers, and everybody's at your disposal when we're working to come up with a comprehensive plan for you. And here are the locations that we're offering Veeam services in. And really, that's it. So now I'm going to open it up to Q&A if anybody has any questions they'd like to go over.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm going to pop up a poll question here that just says, what additional information would you like about the phoenixNAP solution? And I'll just leave that up there for the audience. So let's see, first question here, I think this one is for Anthony. Christopher is asking, what retention of backup data, do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, it really depends on the business case. So, yeah, to answer that sort of question, we've got to understand, the criticality. What I would suggest there is that the best thing to do is to categorize your data, okay? So think about your data maybe in a classical tier system, so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 data might be something that you actually might consider replication for, because it's that critical to your organization. Tier 2 might be backup data that you want to back up once a day, and basically have that retained for a period of 7 days, and then what you have for tier 3 then works out to be maybe more long-term retention. So typically customers will start off with a 30-day sort of cycle. That's my experience. So that initial backup, like to the local repository, has about 30 days worth of backup. And then what they do is they start sending the copies through backup copy jobs off-site, or they do it locally, depending on which way they're leaning towards. And then they start to basically do GFS, or grandfather son, which basically will roll up those 30 days into X amount of months, X amount of years, and so on. So, you know, it's really, again, up to the particular business case, but the longer you can retain your data, the better. And obviously, as well, it comes down to a compliancy point of view as well. If you're a business that is under some sort of regulation, that typically dictates how long your data should be retained as well. So it might be worth checking that.
Okay. Yeah, excellent insight there. And then another question here, and I'm not sure if this is for Bryan or Anthony, but I'll just throw it out there, and that is about Veeam Cloud Connect. Is that a separate package? If somebody already has Veeam, do they have Cloud Connect, or do they license Cloud Connect? How does that work?
So yeah,
I can answer the first part.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go for it, Anthony.
Yes, I can answer from a Veeam perspective. It basically comes with every edition that we have. So if you have Veeam and you've bought it, you have the ability. There's a separate menu item there that says service providers, and basically from there you'll be able to connect up. Now the second part of that is to go to phoenixNAP and sign up and get a service from them. So yeah, Bryan, I don't know if you wanted to add from that, but it's basically built in by default.
Yeah, I was going to repeat exactly what you said, and yeah, we do offer free trials for everything, so we encourage you to reach out, and we'd be happy to get you guys set up with that. It's really easy to use. Like Anthony mentioned, you just literally add some a host name and some login credentials, and you have access to send offsite backups to us. It's a great service.
Okay, excellent. And then another question here. If someone doesn't have Veeam at all, or maybe they have a different solution today, and they're interested in using Veeam with phoenixNAP, do they buy Veeam licenses from phoenixNAP, or do they buy the licenses from Veeam and then use them with phoenixNAP? How does that work?
So they would go through a traditional distributor. There are a wide variety of distributors mentioned on Veeam's website, and purchase through them.
Okay, nice. And then, Bryan, what do you recommend people do to get started with phoenixNAP? Is there a process someone typically goes through with someone at phoenixNAP to kind of evaluate and analyze what they have now and what they're needing to do in order to determine how the phoenixNAP service would help them?
Yeah, we typically have, I think the email may have been on a previous slide, but just reach out to sales@phoenixnap.com, and we'd be happy to schedule a phone call and do an assessment of your actual backup or disaster recovery needs, and work with you to really right size it and set up some trials and make sure everything is working the way you expect.
Excellent. Well, this has been a great presentation. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Bryan. It's been great having you on. We'll see you next time.
No worries. Good to be on. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.